How to putty walls. Here are 5 errors that ruin everything. Imagine this. You have just finished your renovation. You step back a couple of steps to admire the result, and suddenly you notice how a shadow runs along a perfectly flat wall as if someone had run a finger along it. Your heart stops. You come closer and you see that under the wallpaper or paint, bumps, cracks, and pits appear, which you were sure you had eliminated. All this is not the result of a bad coating, not the fault of the painter, and not even the fault of cheap materials. This is the consequence of 5 critical mistakes during the puttying process that 9 out of 10 beginners and even some professionals make. Today, we will analyze each of them together. We will not just list them, but show why they destroy the result, how to avoid them, and what to do if you have already fallen into this trap. After all, puttying is not just about filling holes, it's a whole art of surface preparation, on which it depends whether your interior will look like the cover of a glossy magazine or like an unfinished basement. You will find out why even the most expensive paint will not save a poorly puttied wall, how to choose the right composition for a specific task, why light control is needed, and why many people think that smooth is when nothing is visible, although in fact, smoothness is checked completely differently. Ready? Then let us start from the very beginning, from the moment when you take a spatula in your hands and think to yourself, well, what could be so difficult here? The first and perhaps the most fatal mistake that almost everyone who encounters puttying for the first time makes is neglecting the preparation of the base. Many believe that it is enough to simply apply a layer of putty on old plaster, wallpaper, or even on peeling paint, and everything will be fine. But imagine that you were trying to glue a photo on dusty glass. Sooner or later, it will surely fall off. The same thing happens with putty. If the base is not cleaned of dust, grease, old coatings, or if it is not properly primed, then the new layer simply will not bond with the surface. It may look great immediately after application, but in a few days or even hours, it will begin to bubble, peel off, or crack. It is especially dangerous to work on old wallpaper. Even if they seem strong, the glue under them often loses adhesion, and the putty literally floats on the surface. No less treacherous are areas with remains of old whitewash. The chalk does not allow the putty to penetrate deep, and the bond turns out to be superficial. Proper preparation is not just wiping the surface with a rag, it's a full-fledged process. Removing everything unstable, removing dust, degreasing if there are stains, and then the mandatory application of a deep penetration primer. The primer does not just glue the dust, it creates a microscopic roughness to which the putty clings like the roots of a tree to the soil. Without this stage, even the most expensive finishing composition will turn into a useless mass.
And yes, you need to prime more than once, especially if the wall is porous or absorbs moisture strongly. The first layer is absorbed almost instantly, while the second already forms a protective film. Skip this step and you risk redoing all the work from scratch. The second mistake, which seems harmless but in reality destroys everything, is using the wrong type of putty for a specific task. Many people think that putty is just putty, and they buy the first package they see in the store. But in fact, there are at least 3 main types: starting, finishing, and universal. The starting putty is coarse with a large grain, intended for leveling serious differences and filling deep cracks and pits. Its graininess allows you to apply thick layers without the risk of cracking. Finishing putty, on the contrary, is ultra-fine, almost like powder, and serves exclusively for creating a mirror-smooth surface for painting. Universal is a compromise, but it is better to use it only in those cases when the differences are small and you do not plan to paint the walls in a gloss. Error number 2 is, for example, an attempt to fill a deep hole with finishing putty. Such a layer will inevitably crack when drying, because finishing compositions are not designed for a thickness of more than 1 or 2 millimeters. Or, on the contrary, applying starting putty as the last layer. Then all its large particles will be visible under the paint, and the wall will look like sandpaper. Another common confusion is between dry mixes and ready-made pastes. Ready-made pastes are convenient, but they are more expensive, have a limited shelf life, and often lay worse on vertical surfaces. Dry mixes require mixing, but give more control over consistency and strength. And do not forget about the operating conditions. For bathrooms and kitchens, you need moisture-resistant compositions. For unheated rooms, frost-resistant. And for children's rooms, environmentally neutral ones without harmful fumes. Choosing a putty is not a matter of price, but a matter of understanding the task. And if you do not know which one you need, it is better to consult with a seller or an experienced master than to then scrape everything back to the foundation. The third mistake, which seems like a technical trifle but in reality kills the appearance of the wall, is incorrect application and leveling. Even the highest quality composition will not save you if it was applied crookedly. Many beginning masters think that it is enough to simply smear the defect and spread the mass over the wall. No, putty is not dough that can be rolled out however you want. Here, the technique is important. The angle of inclination of the spatula, the direction of movement, and the pressure on the tool. For example, when applying the starting layer, the spatula should be at an angle of about 45 degrees so that the mass fills the recesses well. With a finishing pass, the angle decreases to 20 or 30 degrees to cut off the excess and create the most even plane possible.
It is very important to move in one direction, from top to bottom or from bottom to top, but not randomly. Otherwise, steps will remain on the wall, which are barely noticeable differences that under a certain angle of light turn into real hills. Another common mistake is working dry, that is, without pre-moistening the spatula or the wall. A dry spatula scratches the surface and leaves furrows, while moisture helps the putty to slide much better. But you also cannot over-moisten, because then the composition will become too liquid and will flow. The ideal balance is achieved through practice. It is also critically important not to hurry. Each layer must dry completely before applying the next one. If you apply a second layer on an already moist first one, then a process of steam formation will begin inside, which will lead to swelling and peeling. And you need to check dryness not with a finger, but with a moisture meter, or at least by following the time specified in the instructions. Finally, one cannot forget about light control. This is when you examine the wall with side lighting, for example with a flashlight or through a window. Only in this way can you see the smallest irregularities that remain invisible in ordinary light. Without this step, you may be sure that the wall is ideal, but in reality, it is all in waves. The fourth mistake, which is rarely noticed until the final stage, is neglecting sanding or performing it incorrectly. Many people think that since I applied the finishing putty, it is already smooth enough. But in fact, even the most careful layer leaves micro irregularities, traces from the spatula, and small lumps. And if you immediately cover this with paint, especially glossy paint, then all these defects will become visible like on a cinema screen. Sanding is not just cleaning the wall, it is the final fine-tuning of the surface to perfection. But here too, there are pitfalls. First, you cannot sand on wet putty, only after complete drying. Second, you need to use the right grit of sandpaper. For the starting layer, coarse, for example 40 or 60, and for the finishing one, fine, 120 or 150. Third, you need to sand not with circular movements, but strictly along or across so as not to create vortices. And the main thing is to definitely use a sanding mesh or a special sanding machine with a vacuum cleaner, because dust from sanding is not just dirt, it is a fine suspension that settles on walls, floors, furniture, and even in the lungs. You cannot work without a mask and a respirator. After sanding, the wall must be thoroughly de-dusted, not just wiped with a rag, but using a vacuum cleaner with a soft nozzle, and then primed again. Yes, priming after sanding is also mandatory, because sanding opens the pores of the putty, and without primer, the paint will be absorbed unevenly, leaving stains. Skip this stage, and your expensive paint will lie in spots, as if the wall is sick.
The fifth, and perhaps the most treacherous mistake, is ignoring environmental conditions during work. Putty is not just a paste, it is a chemical composition that reacts to temperature, humidity, and even the rate of drying. Many people decide to do renovations in winter in an unheated apartment, thinking that it will dry out and that is fine. But at low temperatures, below +5 degrees, most gypsum and polymer putties simply do not gain strength. They dry slowly, crumble, and crack. In conditions of high humidity, for example in a new building where the screed is not yet dried, the putty may not dry at all for weeks and then begin to mold. And vice versa. If you turn on powerful heaters or open all the windows to a draft, then the putty will dry too quickly and a crust will form on the surface under which moisture will remain. This will lead to swelling, peeling, and the appearance of microcracks. Ideal conditions are temperatures from +10 to +25 degrees and humidity no higher than 65%.
It is also important not to apply putty to a cold wall, especially in old houses where walls weep from condensation. Before working, they need to be warmed up, for example with a fan heater. And remember, even if you did everything correctly but violated the climatic conditions, the result will be ruined. It's like baking a cake in a cold oven. Externally, it may look normal, but inside it is raw. Now that you know these 5 deadly mistakes, you are already ahead above most of those who take on puttying. But knowledge is only half the battle. The second half is attention, patience, and respect for the process. Puttying walls is not a race, it is a meditation that requires focus and strict adherence to technology. Each layer is a step towards the ideal, and skipping any of them means undermining the entire construction. But the most important thing is not to be afraid to learn. Even the best masters once started with crooked walls and peeling putty. Mistakes are not a failure, they are lessons recorded in your memory. Therefore, if you are now standing in front of a bare wall with a spatula in your hand, do not rush. Stop, think, check the base, choose the right composition, watch the climate, work methodically, and remember that an ideal wall is not the one on which there are no defects, but the one on which you yourself are not afraid to turn on the side light. So take responsibility for every millimeter of the surface, and then your renovation will not just stand the test of time, but will also become a source of pride. And if you want to know even more about how to work with corners, how to putty drywall without reinforcing tape, or how to achieve a mirror shine for painting, do not stop at this. Read, watch, try on draft walls, ask questions, and share experiences. After all, everyone who strives for quality makes this world a little more beautiful, 1 square meter at a time.